Thank you very much. I've never quite worked out where the love hearts come from, or I guess you can just press them, whatever. Hi, Natasha. Good to see you again, Natasha. It's really good. Lost vibes. Charlesy, Raymond. Good to see everyone. Thank you so much for the love hearts. Um, yeah, so it's Joe Thomas from the Joe Thomas newsletter. Hi, Joe from New York. Linda. Oh, I love it. New York City. Hi, Joe. Nibbles. Natasha's saying hi to me. Nibbles, for those who don't know, is my dog. Hi, Sandra. It's good to see you, Sandra. Good to see you again on here. Yeah, my dog's name is Nibbles. And hello, hope you're doing great. Thanks, Raymond. Thank Izzy. Hi from Cape Cod. Oh, wow. Okay. Where is Cape Cod? I'm not sure where that is on the way there. Hi, Juan. Thanks to see you again. She, that's right. Natasha, who just said she on the chat, she posted a adorable name for your dog, Nibbles. Yeah. The dog was named by my son when he was 5 years old. And and the dog is, for those who haven't seen my dog, it's a Mauchi, which is half Chihuahua, half Maltese. So it's only like a small dog, but it's quite furry. And my dog named her Nibbles because when she was a puppy, she was nibbling on everything. But we just call her Nibs. But everyone should know that Natasha, who's on the chat, she said, she misgendered my dog and called her a he. Yeah. But Natasha apologized and Nibbles has accepted Natasha's apology. Okay. So I think that's good to get that out of the way. Hello, I'm from the United States. Hi, Raymond. Good to see you from the United States. The United States of America. Thank you. That's fantastic. I love the United States. Great country. It's unfortunate you got a really bad president at the moment. A bad president who, unfortunately, today they released some of the stuff of the Epstein files, which was quite interesting. I mean, it's not really surprising, to be honest, that he was in the Epstein files. But it was kind of surprising that that the Democrats were able to release the files. The worst president. I know. It is he? And I can say this as an Australian who, not so great now with this regime. Yeah, I can say this as an Australian who follows American politics very closely. I've got to say that the average Australian just feels bad for the Americans who didn't vote for Trump. Yeah. So I don't want you guys, sometimes I speak to people in America and they're like, oh, I hope you don't think we're all like this. And we don't. Only a third of eligible voters actually voted for Trump. So that makes about 30%. So everyone knows that the majority of people didn't vote for Trump in the United States. Sure, more people should have voted and got out and voted and stuff like that. But also, I think in the United States, hi Bradley for joining. I think a lot of people weren't paying attention to politics and they were just believing the lies. But whatever, at the end of the day, the only good news that's going on at the moment is that he's in the Epstein files. He's definitely in the Epstein files. It's and there's no doubt about it that he. Let me try to be like, because it'd be very easy for me to just go Trump this, Trump that, right? Let me try to be generous to some degree, right? I shouldn't have to be, but like, even if Trump himself, he's running scared. That's right, Linda. Even if Trump himself didn't do anything, so I'm just being really generous, right? Even if he didn't do anything himself, we now know almost certainly that he knew, right, that what Epstein was doing. So at the very least, he was covering up for Jeffrey Epstein. That is pretty conclusive, right? That he knew what he was doing. That's pretty bad, even if he didn't do anything with underage girls himself, right? Because covering up because think about this. Caroline Levitt, the White House press secretary, came out today, right? This is it blows me away how she could just lie so like blatantly lie. But she came out today. We not only didn't vote for him, but we are devastated that someone as evil as he's destroying our country. Yeah, yeah, exactly, Izzy. Yeah, and Izzy. I mean, if anybody, it's easy for people like me in Australia And yes, he does affect other countries with his tariffs, and the United States being the most powerful country on the planet and economically military has a big impact on the rest of the world. So that's why a lot of people like me pay attention, because whoever runs America can affect the whole world. So we want him gone as much as you. Well, it's easier for us because we don't have to live in that country. But yeah, I think it's good for us to support you guys as much as we can from other countries who also don't like him. But Caroline Levitt basically was just, I couldn't believe, sending love and hugs to you, Joe Thomas. Oh, thanks, Raymond. Thanks, mate. I really appreciate that. And lots of hugs and loves to you, everybody in the United States, from Australia, and um, that's coming from everybody in Australia, 100%. I've spoken to everyone here, and they've all agreed with me that they hate Donald Trump. Yeah, 100% hate him. Um, there might be like, I appreciate the support, Australia. Yeah, I'll pass it on. Afterwards, I'll go on Australian Twitter. I just made that up. There's no such thing as main Twitter. But the most recent poll from Australia, thanks, Joe, good to hear that. The most recent poll from Australia shows that only 10% of Australians like Donald Trump. That's pretty low. That's pretty low when you think about it. I don't know who those 10% are. Actually, I probably do. They probably vote for a party. We have a far right wing party in Australia called One Nation, and it's run by a woman called Pauline Hanson, and they get about 10% of the vote. And she's kind of like Australia's version of Donald Trump, and she's always saying nice things about Donald Trump. So I think the people who vote for her, which is about 10%, they're the people who like Donald Trump, because it's all about nationalism and Australia. And by the way, if you ever get on YouTube and you YouTube Pauline Hanson from Australia, One Nation, she can literally not string a sentence together. Like, she just stumbles over her words. It's incredible that someone like that has been in politics for Australia for that long. She's actually less articulate than Donald Trump. Yeah, Google her. Yeah, it's quite funny. She used to own a fish and chip shop, which is fine, and then she got into politics. But she's very nationalistic. She In the 90s, she said Asian invasion, meaning that we're getting too many Asians coming in. So she was saying that. Yeah, so she can be pretty horrible. But yet, Caroline Levitt was basically on today when she was in the press conference, basically said that Donald Trump cut off the friendship with Epstein, right? Cut off the friendship with Epstein because she thought he was creepy. He thought, hard to imagine someone less articulate than Trump. Izzy, Pauline Hanson, Google it, and you will be surprised. I know it would be. I know. Um, Although I would say this, the difference is Pauline Hanson comes from a poor background. So she wasn't born rich like Donald Trump. She didn't go to good schools like Donald Trump. So she has more of an excuse to be like the way she is. Trump has no excuse. He got like all the benefits in the world and still ended up that dumb. So I'll give Pauline Hanson that, is that she came from a poor family. I think she left school when she was like 13, 14. So I would say, in comparison, Trump is still worse because he got way more benefits than Pauline Hanson got. So when you match them up, yeah. But Caroline Levitt was basically saying, like, he cut it off. The funny thing about that is, a couple of months ago, Trump was being interviewed, right? Trump was being interviewed. Hi, Kimmy, nice to see you again. Trump was being interviewed, and he basically came out and he said to the person, he said, the reason he stopped talking to Epstein, hey Kimmy, the reason he stopped talking to Epstein was because he was stealing his staff. Every word out of Caroline Levitt is a lie. I know, but like, she's like basically coming out. She's basically coming out and saying, making up a story, because there's been that narrative, right? That narrative of Trump cutting it off with Epstein because he found out he was creepy. That's been a really big narrative in the MAGA movement. They talk about that for years and years. Like, if you're on Twitter or or any of the online influencers, they'll go, no. Trump can't have anything to do with it because Trump got rid of him because he found out he was creepy. And then Trump goes on TV. This is such a Trump thing to do. Trump goes on TV and contradicts everything that they've been saying for years. I love it. He just basically says, no. Oh, the reason I the reason I stopped talking to him because he was like poaching my staff, stealing my staff from Mar-a-Lago, and some of those staff that he was stealing were women, right? Women who were actually like ended up being like molested. He can't help himself. Exactly, Sandra. He can't help himself. I love. That's my favorite thing is when people around Trump make up a narrative on his behalf. Like they know it's bullshit, but they just make it up because they're better at spinning it. And then they've been saying that for years and years. They come up with some narrative about him, and then he'll go on TV and completely blow them away. And it's like, and they you could just imagine they must be going, "Oh, Donald, please, we've been lying on your behalf for a couple of years now." And then you go on TV and you completely like, it must be hard being a Trump supporter. The mental gymnastics that you have to do all the time to be a Trump supporter must be incredible. Like you see them on Twitter constantly, like, with the tariffs. First, he came out and he said, "Oh, the tariffs are really good for the country. I love tariffs. They're fantastic." And then he claims that Epstein stole girls from him. Like, yeah, yeah, like he owned them. Exactly, Easy. He talked about the people who Epstein stole, and I believe that's probably part of the reason why he did. I think Trump was telling the truth, and the people that he stole, he did. He talked about them like they were like property, not just staff. Um, so again, I know it's a horror. The way he thinks about people is, I still can't believe to this day that Trump won the election on the backs of working class people when he despises that group the most out of anybody. Like, could you imagine Trump ever socializing with working class people? I could totally imagine Joe Biden socializing in a genuine way, but I just can't imagine Trump. The people who love Trump the most are the people he despises the most. That's the crazy part about this, right? Um, and it's just insane that he's got away with it for so long. I do feel now, David, he won because he appealed to their inner racism. Yeah, I think so. I think there's different groups of people who voted for him, which actually makes me feel a little bit better. I think there are the hardcore base, the nationalist, the racist type people who did vote for him. But I think there was other people who voted for him who were like, they were more they were more thinking about the economy. They're not the people who've got the hats on, putting going to the National Republican convention last year. Do you remember the Republican convention last year? And those Trump supporters were sitting in the front aisle and they had those like lady sanitary pads on the ears, completely normal. Why wouldn't you do that? Put a little sanitary pad on your ear, and they're like staring. Have you seen those photos? And they're like staring up at Trump, like he's like dear God, and it's just sitting there. There's a whole bunch of them with just sanitary pads on the ears, and they're smiling, just looking at him, and like that. And then if you call them a cult, they'll go, "What? No, we're not a cult. Absolutely not. We're not a cult." I mean, that was the most insane that photo from the national convention just encapsulates how stupid this like insane this group is. Like, what would possess you to put that on your ear, right? As some sort of like tribute. Mr. Joe Thomas, please give me a follow back after live. I would like to speak on something important, private. Thanks. Okay, Raymond. I will do that. Yeah, okay. Yep. I'm scared now. I'm scared, but I will do that. Sandra, Dave from California, thank you so much, Dave, from joining again. But yeah, I mean, it's hi, Dave, good to see you. Christ, oh, fascists and Trump supporters when you're in two cults at the same time. Yeah, they are. Like, it's incredible that even with the Epstein files, like I was on it's possible to wrap one's mind around. Well, I was on Twitter today, and the funniest thing is because of all these Epstein things that just came out today. So I went on Twitter and I often do this and I don't recommend it because it's not good for your mental health. But on Twitter, I will go on to like the big influencers, people like Laura Loomer, who's like the sort of Rasputin of the MAGA movement. And then I'll go on to, Benny Johnson, all these people like even Donald Trump Jr. And what I found is Donald Trump Jr. was ignoring. So a lot of his people just ignore the Epstein stuff, like they pretend like it's not happening, or they'll call it like a diversion. They'll say, "Oh, like it's a diversion." Like Trump posted out was like a diversion away from the shutdown. Like that's the other thing. Like at the end of the day, as much as I would have liked the Democrats to stick out the shutdown, I still think the Democrats came out better than Trump. I mean, yes, they caved. I wish they didn't cave, but at the end of the day, it's not a win for Republicans. Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks, appreciate that, Ray. I really appreciate that. He's the master of deflecting. Yeah, exactly, Sandra. He is the master of deflecting, and but I don't think it's gonna. I don't think it's gonna work this time. I really don't. It's when 2024 last year, the reason why his BS worked is not. I've been thinking about this actually, and I think cult leaders and dictators use fear and others to manipulate. Yeah, I think last year, when I think about it, Trump had so much going for him, right? And things that were outside of his control. For example, inflation was the number one reason people voted against Kamala Harris, and we know that people blame incumbent governments. There is something happening at the moment where, and it's not just in America, it's in Australia, Europe, Scandinavia, everywhere, where if you're the incumbent government, you get blamed for anything that goes wrong in terms of the economy and they kick you out. My 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 analysis of this is because since COVID, less people now follow politics as in terms of mainstream media. Everyone now gets their news, almost everyone, or anyone under the age of 75 gets their news from online. And a lot of times the people you follow are on one side. So if you're a liberal, you'll follow liberal people. If you're a conservative, you follow conservative people. And so a lot of people are not following politics the same way they used to. They're watching two different types of news. And then you have, hi Melissa, nice to see you again. And then you have all these people who are not following politics at all, right? And this is a big thing since COVID. They're too busy bringing up their children. They don't, nobody goes home and watches nobody goes home and watches the news like we used to back in the 90s and early 2000s, where everybody would watch the news at 6 or 7 o'clock. And you're watching the news out of 6 or 7 different networks, right? So confirmation bias, exactly, is it? That doesn't happen anymore. We now get our news. We either get our news, goodbye, mate. Thanks, Bob. Good day, mate. Good day. Sorry, I thought you said goodbye. Good day, mate. Good day, Bob. Good to see you from Australia. Yeah, g'day. And a lot of people don't are just getting like their news from like echo chambers and stuff like that. And I think when you do that, and then when you got a lot more people who don't pay attention, there's a lot more low information voters than there used to be. And that's since COVID, where people are just not paying attention at all. So if you don't pay attention to politics, you just base it on your everyday lived experience. And the everyday lived experience for people last year was inflation had gone up. And even though Biden did a really good job of like bringing it down, inflation is accumulative. So it doesn't go backwards. You're still paying more. And I'm not blaming Biden for it. Post-COVID inflation affected every country on the planet, my country, Europe, Scandinavia. And in fact, under Biden, they did the best out of any Western country to bring it down. So in fact, but I will say this, it's a very hard argument to make in an election that yes, prices have gone up, but they've gone up less in my country, like Biden could say. So that's why it's a hard argument to make, because people aren't paying attention to what you're saying. They're just paying attention to when they get petrol, how much rent they're paying, they can't buy a home. That's how they're getting that. Their news is their everyday living experience. Their news isn't MSNBC. Their news isn't Fox News. It's just whatever happens to them that day, the rent bill, the this. That's the main form of news that people are getting these days. It's their own experience. And it might even be like they might be on Facebook, on a Facebook group with people, and they sometimes go, hey, have you seen like gas prices gone up, electricity prices have gone up, second. And so that's the news. So it's a very hard thing. Now, that was a big advantage to Trump, because Trump wasn't the incumbent government last year. And everybody knows that 2024, there was more incumbent governments kicked out than any time in modern history. So that's a massive thing, right? And Trump had that in his favor. I think he had other things in his favor as well. I think the border, I think people did start, maybe thought the border was getting a bit out of hand. And when you have problems with the economy, the first people you blame is immigrants. So you've got the economy going bad, you've got immigration coming in at higher rates, and then people blame those two things, right? It's like you're being nicer to immigrants than you are to the people living. That's the way a lot of people think, and so and then on top of that, right? On top of that, you had the assassination attempt, which I think actually, like, it wasn't a good thing, but so yeah, and crime. Thanks, David. Crime was also a thing, but the assassination attempt actually gave him even more and more momentum, right? Because he positioned himself as the outsider, right? He was the outsider. The Biden and Kamala Harris were the insiders. And I think in this day and age, if you look at Zohran Mandami, right? Zohran Mandami, he's the outsider. Who was the insider? Cuomo, right? So he positioned himself. And even though Cuomo was a Democrat, it didn't matter, right? It's the same thing like what Trump did in 2016. Trump went after Republicans and he went after Democrats. He went after everyone because it wasn't about whether he was a Republican or a Democrat. He was the outsider. And I think the same thing happened with Trump last year. It wasn't necessarily that he was a Republican. He somehow convinced a big part of America that he hadn't been a president 4 years earlier. So, and I think showing up at court every day. You remember he was at court every day and all that sort of stuff. And because of that, he became the outsider again. And when there was an assassination attempt on him, that just confirmed the outsider again, right? Man, your speech is so 100% boom, accurate and straight. Thanks, Raymond. Appreciate that. And I think that's the thing. He became the outsider again somehow, even though he was president before. And now everyone wants to position themselves at the outsider. Now, here's the problem with that. So yeah, he had the assassination attempt. That tells what was their story? They're trying to get me. They're trying to stop me. I'm the outsider, and the establishment is trying to stop me, right? I'm the outsider, right? It's all that stuff, outsider, And of course, what do you have the Democrats doing? The Democrats are saying we want to go back to normality, right? We want to keep the status quo. That was almost the worst thing you could have said, because now the Democrats are they're openly saying we are the establishment. We want to keep. Now I get that. I agree with a lot of that stuff, but from a 2024 position, like fighting for the establishment was the worst thing you could have done, in my opinion. And then you got Trump going on podcasts and all that stuff. Like, it's just like it was the wrong timing, right? The timing was wrong, and unfortunately, people in last year, they were more interested in the economy, right, and immigration and crime than they were in whether Trump was an authoritarian or not. And people will generally, if you look around Western countries, if you look at Viktor Orban from Hungary, who I think I don't think Trump wants to be Hitler. I think Trump wants to be Viktor Orban from Hungary. If you look at Viktor Orban, it's almost exactly the same thing. I think the assassination attempt was there. Correct, yeah. So I think a lot of that stuff is basically, but here's the problem for Trump, and here's the problem for MAGA, here's the problem for J.D. Vance or Tucker Carlson next year, is that they are now the incumbents, right? They are now the insiders. And you saw with Zohran Mandami, what he did quite well is he tied Cuomo together with Trump. He turned them into the establishment. Cuomo is getting money from Trump. Trump is being supported by the billionaires, right? So it doesn't even matter what your politics is. I'm not even saying this as someone from the far left. I'm saying this just in terms of optics. It's just optics, right? Optics, me too. Optics is, at the moment, outsider wins, insider doesn't. Now, I think, but at the same time, you did have more moderates in Virginia and New Jersey also win. And so it is a bit more complicated, depends where you are. And now we have the Epstein files. Exactly. Yeah. And the Epstein files is an interesting thing because the Epstein files to me was never about just the Epstein files. It was never just about Epstein. Epstein files to me represented the deep state, right? The deep state and the Epstein files like were linked together. So when all of MAGA, who are obsessed with with the deep state and conspiracies and all that, the number one thing was the Epstein files. So and you had JD Vance. Like I saw a text message the other day from a Twitter post from 2021 from JD Vance, and he says when your government is something like if your government is hiding the Epstein files from you, that's probably not a good thing. It was something like that, right? This is what he said in 2021. So this is old JD Vance, right? And now he's very quiet, right? Now he doesn't talk about it. They don't discuss it. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. He ran on releasing them, but yeah, exactly. And that's the thing about the Epstein files to me and the MAGA movement. They were never obsessed with because of that. They were only cared about the Epstein files because they thought, and this is what they thought. They thought that the files, all the people in the files were going to be Democrats, right? They thought it was just going to expose Democrats all over the country. That was their thing, right? It's going to be Democrats. Then the worst thing is what they did that I think came back to them was Kash Patel, JD Vance, and all those people last year went on all these podcasts like Joe Rogan and all these other big podcasts. Yeah, the chickens are now exactly all these podcasts, and they lied. They lied to the podcasters, and they have millions and millions of viewers. And a lot of the reasons why people like Joe Rogan, other people, they endorse Trump because people like Joe Rogan and a lot of them, they're obsessed with stuff like the Epstein files. Like it is their number one thing. So Kash Patel goes on there. Pam Bondi's going on other podcasts, and they're talking about the Epstein files all the time. And Joe Rogan and all the podcasters, they're like, "Oh my God, this is fantastic! The Epstein files. Trump's going to release the files. He's going to save America. He's going to expose the deep state." And of course, Joe Rogan, they all believed it. Of course, they believed it because a lot of these podcasters, their brains got rotted during COVID, and they became and everything was about woke. It's either if you're anti-woke, then you're on my side. Doesn't matter what your politics is. It was just this obsession with woke or being anti-woke. The funniest thing I always found about the woke thing is that um, people would write about a year ago, people were writing books about woke. So they would actually write a book. And there was one particular, I can't remember her name. She wrote a book about woke. And she was interviewed by Brianna Joy Gray, one of the online people. And Brianna said, "Oh, so you've written this book about woke, it was anti-woke, yeah." And she said, "Can you define woke?" And the woman who wrote it, she's like, you can watch this online, right? It's hilarious. And she starts looking up. She goes, "Oh, this is one of those got you questions, right?" And she can't define. She just wrote a book about. She just wrote a book about woke, and she can't define woke. And she says it's a gotcha question. No, if you just wrote a book about woke, that's not and you asked to define it. This is the problem with the whole woke thing. It's just complete and utter BS. If you have And here's the other thing, even if someone tries to define woke, right, like Joe Rogan and all these podcasters, they all have a different understanding of what woke is. Like Joe Rogan believes in gay marriage. Joe Rogan is very progressive on other things. But other people, they're like, I'm completely against gay marriage. So, I mean, is Joe Rogan now woke? I mean, what's the levels? There's got to be like a level of woke or something, or none of it makes any sense. Woke minds like Rogan get corroded during COVID. Yeah. And that's the thing. If you can't define something, right? If you can't, on my TV, you can see a little koala. Anyway, but it's very Australian, very Aussie. But yeah, if you can't define woke, then you shouldn't talk about it all the time. But, and that's the thing, they can't. And they'll often say things like, "Oh, what are two genders?" or something. Like it's just like they repeat the same thing over and over again. Cute, yeah. So exactly, and I think a lot of these things that we're seeing at the moment with the podcasters and all that is they're now backtracking on their support. And the reason they're backtracking on their support for Trump is that because they lied to him about the Epstein files. So the Epstein files, although I don't think the Epstein files will be the reason why Trump loses or the midterms or 2020, I don't think it'll be the number one reason. Mr. Joe Thomas, please don't forget to give me a follow. I won't, Raymond. I'll definitely give you a follow. I promise you. Yeah. Um, and woke was just another buzzword they use as a put down for liberals. Yeah, exactly. Exactly, David. Bob, they prey on ignorance of facts. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you got to be able to one. If you're gonna upset. Here's the other thing about woke before I move on to like the Epstein files is that if you're gonna obsess about like woke and all that sort of stuff, and you're gonna be like, you know, you're gonna really, really like push that as your number one thing, then when Trump won the election, Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump and they all came out, right? And they all came out and they say, woke is dead. Woke is dead, right? That's what they said when the election was over. Woke is no longer around. That was 9 months ago, right? They still talk about woke like it's the most alive thing on the planet. Now that says to me, right? That says to me is they will never say woke is dead. Even if it was dead, let's just say what? The reason they want to talk about it is because it's a political weapon. They want to use it as a political weapon. And I think, I think the reason they want to keep using it, if you ever see Trump, right? If Trump's in trouble, he will always break in case of emergency thing for Trump is trans women playing sport. Like he will just like if something's going on about Epstein or something, he'll go, he'll just randomly like post something about, and Democrats want everyone to have sex change operations and make it free for everybody. And you know, I think people didn't like a perception of talking down to them for being dumb or not accepting of different people. Yes, that's true, T. That's true. David, it's hard to explain woke to people who not believe in D. What? Yeah, plane crash. Exactly. Yeah. And like I will say this, let me be a little bit like fair. I think there was a period maybe 4 or 5 years ago where there was maybe a little bit too much censorship on the left online with like, you know, comedians being cancelled and all that sort of stuff. I didn't really agree with that. But and like I'm not a very like with comedians or people who make jokes and stuff, it doesn't bother me. I'm not super I'm not honestly, I thought that was a bit over top. But there's a difference, right? That they took that, right? And I think part of the reason why that happened, it's not because necessarily left wing people are necessarily more sensitive. It was that now everybody had access to social media, and therefore everybody can give their own opinion. So in the old days, in the early 90s, also in the 90s or early 2000s, if you're watching a comedian on TV and you're offended by it, you'd have to go, you know, oh, I've got to go find a pen. I've got to go find a paper. I'm going to have to write down that I'm really upset about this. And then I'm going to have to go to the post office. And you're going to think, you know what, forget about it. But now, if you find something offensive, it's generally you're going to be watching it on your phone and you can just go boom, 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 and it's over. So I think that's a lot of the stuff that people don't understand about that people maybe are more sensitive. It's not that unnecessarily people are more sensitive, although people do change as generations get older. I think it's the fact that we have access to give our opinion so easily now, like we never used to, and therefore it gives the impression that there is all these very sensitive people out there, but only the people who are upset about it are the people writing about it. If you're not upset about it, you just don't write about it. So I think it's easy to fixate on what you think is a lot of people, but it's actually a very small percentage of people. Jim, an innocent man would want his files released publicly. Innocent Trump is not doing the exact. Yeah, he is. I mean, in my opinion, I think there's no doubt. Everyone now knows that Trump is in the Epstein files, right? We 100% now know that, right? But as I said before, even if he wasn't sleeping with, even if he wasn't like molesting underage girls, it is 100% certain now that he knew what Epstein was doing, and it's 100% certain now that he knew what was going on. So by knowing that and not saying, and let me say this: if Epstein was stealing workers from his massage because he had a massage place at Mar-a-Lago, why wasn't he warning those people, those young girls, that were being stolen by Epstein, why didn't he expose him and say, hey, stop, I know what you're doing. You're stealing my staff and I know what you're going to do to them. But he never did any of that. All Trump was concerned about was that he was losing staff. Like that's it. It was like a recruitment agency had poached the top IT man, and now your company is really upset by it. So it's really weird. I think there's no doubt about it. But I think the other thing about the podcasters and all that, it's also the money of very powerful rich people. Exactly, Bob. I will. It's interesting you said that, Bob, because I do think about that as well. Is that um, a lot of these Epstein thing is, I think it's easy to get caught up in just Epstein, but I think what it goes away from is the fact that when you get, and this happens outside of Epstein, but it's like Joe, I'd love your perspective on the situation in Venezuela. Oh, right. Where did the underage girls on his staff? Why did he yeah, exactly, Easy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he hired like 16, 17-year-old girls. Exactly, Nicole. On Venezuela, I just, yeah, I mean, I obviously, I don't agree with, I think what he's doing in Venezuela thing is, I'll go back to Epstein, but just quickly. The Venezuela thing, like killing people, right? I think there's up to like 50 or 60 people he's killed so far off the coast of Venezuela in international waters. That is insane. I just can't believe that he's just murdering people with no due process. And Americans are supposed to like just believe him that these people were Rand Paul, right, who voted for Trump, is generally a Trump supporter, said that a lot of, from what the information he has, the people in the boats, right, 70 or 80, yeah, the people in the boats weren't actually heading to America. They were heading to one of the other islands because he said they didn't have enough. It didn't look like they had enough fuel to get all the way to America. And that's coming from Rand Paul, someone who was a big supporter of Trump. So they just cut off. Yeah, the Brits have cut. Yeah, exactly. And so I think like it's just, and then at the same time, the other day I heard him talking and he said, first of all, he said, oh, you know, um, nobody gives me credit for stopping 8 wars. Now, obviously, that's BS. He hasn't stopped 8 wars, right? If the people in those countries that he says he stopped 8 wars from, they just laugh at him, right? They just laugh because he doesn't even know how to pronounce the country's name. He says that like 2 of the countries they're not even next to each other. He just says 8 wars, right? But which is again just shows how much he hates his own base because no one else is believing that. But I think I think you can't say you want the Nobel Peace Prize, right? You can't say, I want the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm stopping all these wars around the country and then but then murder 60 or 70 people without any due process. This doesn't make any sense. And then send a frigate down to Venezuela and threaten them. So it's a really weird situation. Like on the one hand, he's trying to position himself as an isolationist, anti-intervention. And on the other hand, he's talking about invading Greenland, annexing Canada, bombing Venezuela. Like these things don't really make a lot of sense when you put them together. But I think they make a lot of sense when Trump is surrounded by yes people and the people, he got away with a lot of lies in 2024, right? And he got away with those lies. I think this is where I think Trump is making a mistake. This is what I think Trump's making. Trump is thinking of 2024 and he's thinking, I talked about cats and dogs, Haitians eating cats and dogs. He lied all the time. He said he was going to bring inflation down by day one. He said he was going to, stop the war. He said, and he won the election. So in his mind, he's thinking, I lied through 2024 and I won the election and I won all these states, right? And now he's thinking, I can do the same thing. I think the big factor he's missing out on is that a lot of those people, I don't think were believing his lies. They voted for him because they weren't paying attention to what he was saying, and they voted for him because they thought he was going to make inflation better. He snatched people off the streets, countries due process, and yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's insane. It's insane, is it what he does? There's 20K troops down there now. It's unnerving for Trinidad. Yeah, yeah. You can't. I mean, the thing is that like there's a strange thing happening in MAGA media at the moment, and there's like I think people are positioning themselves now. 14 warships have been deployed. Yeah, that's crazy. I think the interesting thing about MAGA media is that they're positioning themselves, and I'm talking about people like Megan Kelly, Tucker Carlson, right, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's obviously in the government. I think they're positioning themselves now as the next lane, a separate lane to Donald Trump for the 2028 election. I think Tucker Carlson is going to run at the election 2028. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is as well. I think it's possible Megan Kelly could. And I think they're going to run as against, they're going to run as MAGA, like actually MAGA, but a more pure version of MAGA, which is less interventionist. So they're going to criticize Trump for going into Venezuela and helping Israel and all this sort of stuff. And they're going to run, it's all about making money for themselves. Yeah. And they're going to run. So interesting. Tucker Carlson said the other day, and I actually do think Tucker Carlson probably will be the front runner in 2028 because I think JD Vance is tied to Trump too much, as where Tucker Carlson is trying to keep the MAGA base by not directly criticizing Trump, but criticizing the policies without saying it about him because he doesn't want to lose the base. He wants to bring the base over to him, and he'll bring the base over to saying Trump wasn't actually everything he said he was. I am that person, right? So I think he's got a good chance of winning the primary in 2028. And what he's saying about Venezuela is quite interesting, right? What he's saying about Venezuela is he said, I don't understand why the government, he always says the government, he never says Trump, he never mentions him by name, right? Which is always hilarious. Whenever they criticize, they will, whether it's Laura Loomer, whether it's anybody else, they don't say his name. Marjorie Taylor Greene, they've criticized, but she doesn't say his name. It's always somebody else, right? It's hilarious. People hate JD Vance, even MAGA people. Yeah, exactly, Bob. And so he was, Tucker Carlson was saying, which, which I think is, which I think is quite revealing, is that he said they shouldn't go into Venezuela, and then he said, "Well, Maduro. Maduro is the president of Venezuela. He, even though he's left wing, I don't think he's that left. I think he's a dictator, right? I don't think it's about left or right wing. I think he's just a dictator. And anyway, he says he's very far left on economics. However, Maduro is very conservative because he's anti-woke, he's anti-gay marriage, right? That's what he's saying. And then he says he's anti-woke, anti-gay marriage, and he's anti-trans. Trans people getting like transgender surgery. And he was kind of implying that that's a reason for not to invade Venezuela because the guy is the guy because Maduro is anti-woke. This is the brain rot of the MAGA movement. Like wokeness trumps economics. Wokeness, like it's just weird. That's why I think, I do think they want their oil as well. Yeah. But I think it's interesting that the MAGA movement is kind of fragmented at the moment between what I believe is going to be, and I think the Venezuela thing will be a key point in that movement, where the anti-interventionalists like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and other people like Rand Paul and other people, Thomas Massey, they will run as a sort of a separate MAGA movement, not necessarily against Trump, but a more pure version of what Trump said he was going to be. And I think that's going to happen. And so I think Venezuela, I don't think he's going to put boots on the ground because he doesn't want to be seen. Trump doesn't want to be seen as the president who puts boots on the ground because he would absolutely lose his base if that happened, right? But I think they would be okay with bombing Venezuela, threatening. I think what he wants to do. I think the Don Jr. wants the cocaine. Yes. Well, yeah. It's good. Apparently, David, there is good cocaine there as well. Colombia apparently has good cocaine and Venezuela as well. But Donnie Jr. Donnie Jr. will be the dad would be like, we want the oil, and Don Jr. would be like, look after your son. Look after your son. And so I think there is definitely a lot of that happening. Where I don't think they're going to send troops in. I really don't. Um, but I do think that I think in their brain they think if we put all these warships right around them, we kill the people, that Maduro will resign, and then they will try to replace Maduro without besides the killing of the fishermen or wherever they are, um, without like firing a bomb in there, they think that they can get rid of Maduro. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some talk going with an opposition party in Venezuela to put more pressure on Maduro. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens. Um, but I don't think it's going to be like an invasion of Venezuela. I don't think Trump will do that. Um, because the other thing is, if he does do that, the next person who runs against him or runs against MAGA will make Trump or JD Vance the George W. Bush of 2028. And you don't want to be the George W. Bush of 2028 because remember, Trump was losing in 2016. Trump was not doing very well. The Brits have stopped sharing intel with the US. Yeah, exactly. In 2016, right? Trump did. Trump was actually not doing that well in the primaries at the start, but when Trump started going after like Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and all these other people in the party, that's when he started getting popular, and he started going after them by calling them warmongers, saying that they went into the war, blaming them for the war in Iraq, all that sort of stuff. So I don't think Trump wants to set himself up as being the George W. Bush of the thing. I think with Trump is he thinks he can intimidate them enough, right, to voluntarily, right, um, basically cave, and then have a right wing party come in and look and maybe be more favourable with oil and production, all that sort of stuff as well. I also think this could be being pushed by Marco Rubio because Marco Rubio has always had a thing about Venezuela. Even before Trump, he didn't like Venezuela. So Marco Rubio hates Cuba, hates Venezuela, and Marco Rubio has become quite close with Trump. So it's hard to know how much of it's coming from Marco Rubio. I find it quite ironic that after complaining about Hillary's emails, same as I think that they're taking. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Yeah, I know. It's like it's a weird thing when so many of the things that Trump and MAGA said in 2024 have ended up being like happening, but on the other side, like, little Marco, yes, man, yeah, little Marco Rubio, he's not a big fan of Venezuela, right? He's hated Venezuela for a long time. And I believe that in 2016 to 2020, he was encouraging Donald Trump back then, but I think Trump was more wary back then about doing something about Venezuela and also doing something about Cuba, right? So I think this might be every accusation is a confession. Exactly, David. I think this might be a bit of a Florida thing, like coming from for Floridians. The people a lot of people in Florida, they're not big fans of Venezuela or Cuba, and I think that's where this is coming from. I do think Trump does like Marco Rubio a lot. I think you can tell that he supports a lot of things he says. Trump doesn't know a lot about the history of Cuba, but he doesn't know any of that stuff. Marco Rubio is a bit more switched on. He's a bit smarter. He kind of understands a lot of the stuff that's going on. So I think it could potentially, to me, it definitely looks like it's lots of Cubans in Florida. Yeah, exactly. It is a bit of a Florida thing, I think. If you look at all the people who are pushing this, it's definitely the Florida people, and people who originally came from South America, but obviously second, third generation living in Florida, but they don't like the regimes in Venezuela and things like that. So I think, Mark, I think he could be pushed into that. I mean, even if you look at Ukraine, he's kind of like, even though he hasn't supported Ukraine, he's kind of like gone back and forwards. Again, I think he is influenced a lot by the people around him. Um, so I think that's definitely a bit of a thing as well. But hopefully, hopefully he doesn't bomb Venezuela. Um, but who knows with the Epstein files coming out, he's going to need a big distraction. And I'm not sure if trans people in sport is going to be big enough for the Epstein files to get out of this one. Because yeah, and that's the other thing. Like the the diversion thing with trans people in sport in 2024. I think they misjudged that. I actually think that the MAGA movement misjudged how effective there was an ad into Rubio is no different than Cuban bureaucrat, communism one side fashion. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's Dave. Yeah, a lot of these people. Um, the other thing is like, why wouldn't you want to normalize like relationships with Cuba when it's such a close country? Because if you normalize relationships with Cuba, they're going to become more democratic, right? No, Marco's family's from Cuba. His dad was undocumented. Florida has a large Venezuela. Exactly. Yeah, exactly, Nicole. Yeah, I knew that. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It is. In my opinion, this is being pushed by Marco Rubio, little Marco Rubio. Yeah, yeah, but not big Marco Rubio. Yeah, it's amazing how many like derogatory nicknames he gave people in the Republican Party, and they all became his best friends afterwards. Like, yeah, but you know, but I do think going back to this like um, woke thing with the party last year they ran an ad that said we are this is the Republican, we are they are for them, which is meaning that Democrats are for trans people and all that, but we are for you, meaning we are for the average people. A lot of people gave that credit to say it was very effective. I actually in hindsight I did think it was effective. I actually don't think it was as effective as possible because I'm noticing that as much as they tried to talk about trans people this year, that while the polling is going down, it doesn't matter how much they bring up trans people in sport or trans people in that. It's not helping them, right? So I'm thinking it was just a coincidence, right? It was just a coincidence that people were going to vote for Trump anyway because of the economy, because of inflation, and then them saying trans people, Democrats are obsessed about woke and all stuff. That just happened to be a coincidental thing that they pushed at the same time, right? And it wasn't because of that. Had they not pushed the whole anti-woke thing, they still would have won the election because of that. So I think they got in their minds that being anti-trans or being anti-woke and all that stuff, I think it was more effective than it actually was. And I think this year's proving it, right? Now, Democrats, in my opinion, shouldn't run on those issues either because you don't want to get labeled as the party that is during inflation that is concerned about identity politics and other issues more than the cost of living. You have to do cost of living up here because keep in mind that 10 million people decided to sit the election out. Yeah, exactly. Though. Yeah, yeah. And who knows how those people are going to vote. But if you look at the polling now, right, a lot of the polling, like if you look at Virginia and you look at New Jersey during the last elections, forget about New York, a lot of the people that voted for Democrats had about 10% or 7% of those people voted for Trump. Latinos, who Trump got a big slice of, have all come back to the Democrats. Young people have come back to the Democrats, which to me says a couple of things. I think young people are very online, and I think the Epstein files thing made them think, well, Trump is not who we thought he was. Secondly, the economy. They thought that, well, actually, firstly, the economy, then the other stuff. But, at the end of the day, women and young people, yeah, exactly. They came back, right? They came back. And I think this is what I think, and I think this could be true. I think it didn't matter what Democrats did last year. I think they could have lost by maybe less, but I don't think anything Democrats could have done would have made any difference because of inflation. Yeah, the right was better on messaging. Yeah, exactly, Bob. And especially because America, right? Why post-COVID inflation affected every country on the planet, and every other incumbent government got kicked out. So why would it be different for Trump, right? So and Kamala Harris. So I think to some degree. So maybe if Joe Biden had gone earlier and they'd had a primary, and maybe there was a better effective communicator, right? Maybe Democrats could have lost by less, but it's possible that didn't matter what they did, they were going to lose anyway. So, and I think what we're seeing this year is a bit of, I think we're seeing a little bit of proof of that this year, that it doesn't matter any other conversation that's going around. It's more about cost of living, just like what happened to HRC. Americans couldn't stomach a woman president. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think at the end of the day, if as long as you're talking about cost of living, as long as you're talking about the economy, there is an interesting thing that I found out the other day. You know, the US economy did better after COVID than most countries, but people were still, yeah, exactly, Bob. And the Bob, that's the thing. Like when I think about Trump now, Trump goes on TV and he said inflation is gone, the economy is doing great, and nobody's believing him, right? So now last year, Joe Biden didn't say that, but they did try to say that, the economy is doing, they were saying the economy was doing good. And I remember when Joe Biden was saying the economy was doing good, and I saw that, and I saw that people were still paying a lot more for rent, cost of living was so up um, because inflation is accumulative. So even if you stop it from going up, it's not gone back down to what it was 3 years ago. You're still paying more, right? So saying that you've stopped it from continuing to go, you're still paying more than you were like 2 or 3 years ago. So I think when Democrats were saying the economy is doing really good and this and that, I think it was a mistake in hindsight, right? Even though it was true that the Democrats stopped inflation, controlled inflation more than other countries, it's kind of like you don't want to hear that if you're paying more for food. You don't want to hear you're doing better than Europe or Australia or the UK. You're just worried about what's happening to you. So I think that was, and then you're seeing that now with Trump. Trump's doing it way worse, like a billion times worse. He's just pretending like it doesn't exist. He's going, no, inflation's not a problem. It's a hoax. It's gone back to like the Epstein files is a hoax. Inflation is a hoax. But exhibit lies, oldest politician trick in the book, made the other side look weak where we're trying to respond to. Yeah, exactly. And it's not going to work for Trump. But Trump is still living in 2024. This is what I actually really believe is. I think Trump is living in 2024 when this did work for him. But Trump, I think, doesn't understand that it worked for him because he wasn't the incumbent. It's not going to work for you when you're not. I think Trump bought the lie that everyone was believing his lies. I actually don't think most people were believing his lies. I think most people were paying attention to what he was saying. And a lot of people, even if they wanted to believe his lies, they just saw the Democrats concentrating on Trump's an authoritarian and Trump saying, I'm going to bring down your cost of living. And most people were worried about cost of living. So I think, but now people are realizing now they were duped. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they were duped, and they know that they were duped, and now a lot of the people, because a lot of the stuff, if you're not following politics closely, like if you still follow some politics on the peripherals, right? Just a little bit on the sides. You get, like, for example, I know people in Australia who don't follow politics at all, but they get stuff on TikTok. And that's because when something goes viral on TikTok or Instagram, it breaks the algorithm. And people who don't follow politics, they still get that stuff because it went viral. Viral breaks the algorithm, right? Everybody sees it. So they will see that even if they don't like following politics stuff, right? And they would often talk about things like things that gone viral. That's all they remember about politics. So when Trump last year Trump was very good at getting eyeballs, better than Kamala Harris, because Kamala Harris is too normal. And being normal doesn't get your eyeballs. You have to be batshit crazy to get normal. So even with Zohran Mamdani, right? You are more informed than most Americans. Oh, thanks, Bill. Even with Zohran Mamdani, right? He was very charismatic. He used Trump-like tactics sometimes. This was my favorite bit. In 2016, when Donald Trump was debating Hillary Clinton, he brought Bill Clinton's, the women who accused Bill Clinton of sexual assault, he brought them to the debate. It was like theatrics, right? and it got a lot of people's attention. And so what did Zohran Mandami do? When he was debating Andrew Cuomo, he brought one of the women who accused Cuomo of sexual harassment and brought her to the debate and then talked about her. That was a Donald Trump tactic that Zohran Mandami stole, and it worked brilliantly. It got eyeballs on that campaign, right? And it made, again, what else does he do that was similar to that, right? He did other things that were similar. He went after Democrats the same way Trump went after fellow Republicans. He made himself the outsider. He made Cuomo and Trump the insiders. He's a master of entertainment con man. Brought two Epstein victims. Yeah, Adelia brought two Epstein victims to her swearing in ceremony. Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like Zohran Mandani was very good at theatre, and he was very good at getting eyeballs. Even like his number one TikTok video that went viral was when he went from one side of New York all the way to the other, and he wasn't talking to liberals, he wasn't talking to left wing people, he was finding Trump supporters. And he asked those Trump supporters, why did you vote for Trump? And then he just listened to them. And most of them said cost of living. That was much more interesting than if he just went to people who like him and people who agree with him. Online, having disagreements in the algorithms goes further than like echo chambers where everybody, if you watch a video, if you watch a YouTuber telling a politician everything they want to hear, that's not interesting. But Zohran Mandani going into Trump territory in New York and talking to them, that's different. That's interesting, right? Because that's not something a lot of people do. He got out of the left wing. Yeah, he got out of the left wing bubble. And he still criticized. And what he said is, I listened to them. I didn't preach to them. I listened to what they said. And they all came back with cost of living, right? So he turned the whole Trump thing on its head. I have no doubt in my mind that Mandami and his people looked at what Trump has been doing, and they didn't do like he's not Donald Trump, but he took aspects of that and he made it better. And in some ways, it's better for Mandami because Trump doesn't do that well on TikTok because he's like an older man, right? But Mandami is like a 34, 35-year-old. He's a cool looking dude. He's a young, good looking guy. He's got, he's got a nice smile. He's got nice hair. He's a nice guy, and he's very funny. And he's very self-deprecating. And being self-deprecating is something Trump doesn't know how to do. And a lot of people find being self-deprecating very funny. It's more of I think being self-deprecating is more something we do in Australia or the UK. It's a very like make fun of yourself thing. And so Darning to do it. There was one video that he did, and Darning, which was quite funny, is he went the Democrats need a Big Ten. Exactly. I agree, Bob. I agree. Big Ten. Yeah. It needs people who are moderates, centre left, and that. Yeah. In a country of 350 million people, you need as diverse as America, you need people like Zohran Mandami on one side, and you need someone like Chuck Schumer on the other. It doesn't have to be Chuck Schumer. I just mean like his politics. You do need a Big Ten because Zohran Mandami is not going to do as well in a federal election, but you can still take things from him that other people who are more centre left or moderates could use. Right? I'm more talking about the tactics, not just necessarily his politics. And I think that's a real positive. Biden rode the train for years, which exposed him to average people rather than lobby. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the interesting thing. Like that, people like Zohran Mandami, he did one particular video, which I think was fantastic. Listening and not preaching. Yeah, exactly, Bob. That's what he did, and he went to this place in New York where people lift weights, like they're lifting weights. It's outdoors. And anyway, this guy came up to him and he said, "Oh, do some bench press." And so Zoran goes, "Okay, well, I better do this." He's not a weightlifter, right? And he lifted, and he could barely lift anything, right? And now he just laughed. After that, Trump and other people tried to make fun of him because he couldn't bench press a lot. But what did Zohran Mandami do about that? Instead of fighting back or getting angry, he laughed along with it. And in Australia, that's what you do. When people make fun of you, you laugh along with it. You make fun of yourself, and it actually deflects and makes you look actually better that you're not taking yourself seriously, right? Instead of if you get offended by that, you look like an idiot, right? So Zoe Mandani goes on this podcast, Andrew Schultz, and Andrew Schultz has a very popular podcast. He's based in New York. He's friends with Donald Trump. And the interesting thing about Andrew Schultz is that he voted for Donald Trump at the last election. And he's on there and he does amazingly. This Andrew Schultz guy loves him. You should watch it. It was the best thing. And he goes into policies a lot and stuff like that. So even if you don't like him, at least he comes across as much more pragmatic than people realize, and not as left as you think he is. And then anyway, at the end of it, they laughed at, they said, because a lot of these podcasters, they're really into fitness and they're really into weights. So they basically said, oh, that. So they showed that footage of Zohran Mandami not being able to lift very much, and Zohran Mandami just laughs and he goes, you know what? As soon as they asked me to do some bench press, I knew I was in trouble. I knew I was in big trouble, but I had to do it. I couldn't say no. And then when they asked me to lift, I just thought, oh, no, this isn't going to work out well. So he just laughed, and they all just laughed along with it. And he turned something that was like a viral thing against him into something that and then as soon as he did that and that went viral, that was the end of it. The joke was the end. I can't handle being the butt of a joke, which is why he avoided the White House. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Zohran Mandami is, to me, in some ways, like an Australian politician, like a UK. His sense of humour is, I think, less American and more like self-deprecating, sarcastic. When there's another video he does, he's on a bike, like a cycling bike, and someone screams out, "You're a communist!" And he goes, "It's pronounced cycle. It's pronounced bike or cycling or something." And he just makes fun of it, right? He doesn't try to, he doesn't try to like jump away from it. Euro humor. Yeah. And very similar in Australia as well, Nicole. Yeah. And did you ever see Trump laugh? Trump's sense of humor, right? Sometimes he does say funny things. But I think Trump's sense of humor comes from being like, it's more an American sense of humor in some ways. I feel like, it's less separate, just less self-deprecating, and it's more like making fun of other people. Do you know what I mean? Like, you make fun, and that's kind of popular at the moment in America, where you roast people. Everyone gets roasted. You make fun of that person. You roast them. You give them nicknames. There's no, it's okay. It's almost like it's better to punch down than punch up now. In comedic circles, it used to be you punch up, but now it's like, oh, you punch down. It's more funny. So I think that's more like Donald Trump's sense of humor. And look, there have been times where he has made me laugh. I don't want to pretend like he's not funny at all. He's a showman, right? He's a showman. He is entertaining. You can't get away from that. He knows how to get eyeballs. But I don't think he's as funny as people make him out to be. I think that's exactly. My mum said today they never get good pictures of him, or maybe there are none. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah. He, I mean, the way he goes on about how he's good looking and stuff, like, it's like, there are things that, I think he shouldn't get, that I think in some ways probably work in his favor. Like when he does rallies and he talks about, he's talking about I can't remember the golfer's name, but was it Arnold Palmer? I think it was Arnold Palmer. And he was talking about the size of his penis. Like he said that everyone had, like, now, you know, a lot of people go, oh, don't, like, for me, it's like, it's kind of like, that's kind of funny in a way that you got a president like making jokes about that stuff. Mary Trump tells a story that DT getting a huge bowl of mashed potatoes dumped on his head by his older brother. The entire family laughed, but he was completely humiliated. Yep. Yeah, I know. He doesn't like to be. He doesn't like to be made fun of, right? He doesn't like to be like, which is quite funny because, like, the funniest thing I ever saw with Trump is that when they were giving them the name Taco, Trump always chickens out, and he was doing a press conference, and the reporter said, "Oh, how do you feel about people calling you Taco?" And then the reporter explained what it was, and he looked genuinely offended by it, and he looked genuinely upset about it, and he almost said something like, why would someone do something like that?" Like, he was like, "Oh, why would," he's thinking like, "Why would someone be that mean? Like, why would someone give someone a nickname like that? Like, that's just," he was genuinely upset by it. And then I was thinking, this is the guy who gives everybody derogatory nicknames, is now on TV getting, he looks genuinely hurt, thinking, why would someone do this? Like what kind of mean person would give someone a nickname like this? This is you'd have to be crazy to do that. And I I think in his own head, he doesn't look at both things, right? I don't think he's looking at both things and thinking, oh, actually, you know what? I give everybody nicknames: Sleepy Joe, Little Marco Rubio. Yeah, he has no self awareness at all. Yeah, I expect about it. Yeah, uh, yeah, like right. Yeah, he has no self awareness at all, and that's a big thing about the Trump administration. Well, I think other people in the Trump administration have some self awareness, but I think Trump has no self awareness at all. And I think that's a lot of that comes from, I think, living in a bubble when you're around people, right, who are constantly saying yes to you, and I think Trump lives in a media bubble as well. He only watches like Fox News. Like, do you remember when he was talking about sending the troops into Portland? And he's talking about sending troops, and then he says, "Look, I've seen these videos of like, fires and Portland, and it's like a war zone." And apparently, what it was is he was watching Fox News videos from 2020 BLM riots. So like, this was apparently genuine because he was talking to someone about it, and he said, "Well, unless I've been given false information," and I'm like, here you have the president of the United States talking about invading Portland because he'd watched Fox News videos from 4 years earlier, and that's why he's calling it a war zone. I mean, it's a scary thing, right? And then yeah, and he was pissed off. Obama was, yeah. I remember that, David, when Obama roasted him at the I think it was the Correspondence Dinner, yeah, the White House Correspondence Dinner, I think it was, and you look over at Trump and he looks really upset. Now, I don't know if this is true. It's probably not true, but some people made it out that he was so angry by that was the reason why he decided to run as president. Exactly what he should not be president. Yeah. So I hope that's not true. The tattoos on the knuckles, he insisted it wasn't. Yeah. Nicole, that was so funny. Yeah. When he was interviewed about the person who was sent off to Venezuela, I think it was, no, El Salvador, and basically his knuckles, he had knuckles, so yeah, that was so funny because he thought that photo wasn't Photoshop. He thought that was actually saying that on the Photoshop. He actually thought that. And the funniest thing about that, he had MS-13 on there, right? And the funniest thing about that is he was being interviewed, and by sort of like I think it was like a CNN report or something, and Trump is like doubling down on it. No, no, and like the reporter's like, but that was Photoshop, and he's like, no, it wasn't. He gets really upset. He gets really angry about it to the reporter, and then the reporter says, maybe we should move on. Let's talk about something else. And then afterwards, CBS, that's right, yeah, Stone Face, yeah. And afterwards, Trump sends off these posts saying that was, that reporter was really mean to him. He was a real arsehole, all this or that. And I'm thinking, no, that reporter was actually really nice to him because that reporter tried to move the conversation on because Trump kept doubling down on it, which made him look more and more like an idiot. And the reporter was like, oh, let's talk about something else in a nice way. So, if anything, that reporter was trying to help him move on to something else because he was looking like a complete idiot during that thing. They eventually got him fired. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know, and it's crazy. And the other thing is, like the crowd size at the tease on the revenge tour. Yeah, T is on the revenge tour. Exactly. He is. He is. Like the crowd size inauguration. Yeah. Yeah. He gets really upset by some of the sort of easy, like really, really wild things. At the moment, he's talking about suing the BBC and the BBC in the UK because they did a documentary years ago, and the documentary was about January 6th. And they did make a mistake, to be fair. They did make a mistake. They edited out the bit where he said peacefully and patriotically, windmill cancer, magnets. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Um, and so they did do that. But it was seems to be like a genuine mistake. And anyway, people at the BBC were fired because of this, right? He was talking about running for president in the late 80s and 90s. He just kept speaking, okay, yeah. But, so he wants to sue the BBC now because a documentary made a mistake about January 6th. Now, this is just so ridiculous, right? I'm not, Sandra, I'm not sure he believes the knuckles were Photoshopped. I think he thinks he can bend reality, that he thinks many other questions. This is a goal to make you unsure. Yeah. Sandra, I've got to say, that's one thing I've always struggled with. How much is stupidity and how much is lying? Because I have come to the conclusion that there's more stupidity than like there's more stupidity than I originally thought. Um, Only because I've listened to things that he said years and years ago before he was president, and he said some pretty stupid stuff, like even before he was president. So it makes me think, um, yeah, I don't know. I mean, he was an anti-vaxxer before he got into politics. So again, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to know. There's definitely a lot of lying. There's definitely some gaslighting, but I think there's definitely a lot of stupidity there as well, which is, he's stupid, but he's so highly, yeah, he's very manipulative, and he loves to gaslight Sandra. He absolutely does. Um, but yeah, like he wants to sue the BBC, right, over this, and I mean, I don't think he's going to win, and I don't think he's going to win, but I wouldn't be surprised if the BBC pays him out just to like quieten him down a bit. And that's what really annoys me because people keep paying him off, not because they're going to lose, but because they don't want to get into an argument with him. They don't want all this stuff. So they give him 10 million, 15 million, and then he uses that to say that I was right. I was right about January 6th. I was right. And so it gives him ammunition, right? So he goes, I sued the BBC. They paid me money. So therefore I was right about January 6th. So that's how he's going to try to like push it. The BBC did not have to like have people resign. Now I know people resign. Um, I know people resign because, they made other mistakes about other stuff. So it wasn't just him. But still, I feel like they should like pay him out of it. He'll have knowledge deficit because he doesn't read. Yeah, yeah. All he does is watch like Fox News all day. He doesn't read. Correct. Don't understand why I pay him. Yeah. So, in my opinion, I hope they don't pay him. It was like at the end of the day, just yeah. As long as yeah. At the end of the day, as the January 6th thing is so crazy. The way they try to say they will say like, okay, he said peacefully and patriotically. Did he say that? He did say that. What? But that doesn't give you the full understanding of the day. That day was like a month and a half or 2 months after he'd been telling his base that if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country. He kept repeating that over and over again. If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country. Then on January 6th, when he's giving the speech and he's rolling his base up for 2 months, he'd been doing it for 2 months. He then again said, you need to fight like hell or you won't have, think about that. You have to fight like hell, but you won't have a country. That's a pretty extreme thing to say. And then he says, Mike Pence needs to do the right thing. Now, because he says peacefully and patriotically one time out of 2 months of inciting it, suddenly it's like it's not his fault. Like imagine if like, I don't know, Charles Manson, right? Charles Manson got those people to kill on his behalf, right? And imagine if he convinced them for like months and months and months, you need to go kill these people, right? And then right at the end of it, he says peacefully and patriotically, right? Well, how is that a thing? Like, that doesn't work. So for me, saying peacefully and patriotically one time doesn't negate everything that you've been saying for the last 2 months, right? And that's the way he wants people to just fixate on that one particular period. So I think that's, I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's crazy. I don't think the BBC should apologize. So yeah, that's just my opinion. But anyway, I have to go. Thank you, everyone. There's more documents come from Jack Smith and Bill Bird with help. Yeah, oh, great. I have to look at that. Thank you so much, everyone. I've had so much fun. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Kimmy. Thanks, Sandra. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Dave. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Coral. Thank you, everybody, so much. I've really enjoyed it. I'll download this video later. So if anyone wants to share it or like it, please do. It helps me if you do that. If you share and like my video. Thanks, David. Thanks a lot. And I'll definitely follow anybody on here who's not who I haven't followed. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. We love you. Thanks, Kimmy. I love you too. I love the love hearts. Thanks, Bob. It was a fantastic discussion. I loved it. Thanks, guys. Adios.